Thank you, Melanie Phillips. And if you're ever in Jerusalem and you want to grab a cup of coffee again, the most fascinating and in-depth conversations I've had on this subject have been with Melanie. I recommend all of you try to do that if you can catch her when she's not writing her next book or column. Next, Daniel Pipes, Chairman and founder of the Middle East Forum.
Good evening. I am a historian, and I will spend the next few minutes, with your indulgence, giving you a history lesson. And I'll start with some quotes, two quotes. One from Winston Churchill in 1938. So far from being, well, maybe I should tell you what my topic is first, so you have some idea where I'm going. I'm going to argue that the Palestinians made an Aliyah to Palestine in the same way that Jews made an Aliyah to Israel. They're very similar. Quote one, Winston Churchill, 1938. So far from being persecuted, the Arabs have crowded into the country of Palestine and multiplied till their population has increased. Note, crowded into the country. Franklin Delano Roosevelt, 1939. The Arab immigration into Palestine since 1921 has vastly exceeded the total Jewish immigration during this whole period. This is pretty remarkable. Two major leaders, far from Palestine, understanding that there was this major immigration that had taken place. This is forgotten, unknown, basically, today. I'll argue to you that alongside the Jewish Aliyah, or immigration to what is today Israel, a large and diverse Muslim immigration to what the Quran calls the Holy Land, or Al-Ard al-Muqaddasa, also took place. I call this the Muslim Aliyah. It started almost 2 centuries ago and is almost as large as the Jewish immigration. Obscure today, this was once well known. Why is it obscure today? Well, there's been a lot of propaganda, which I won't go into. I'll focus on the facts. The Muslim immigration to Palestine divides into 2 major periods. Before 1948, after 1948. From the 1940s, from the 1840s to the 1940s, 1940s to today. The part before 1948 in turn subdivides into 3 parts. Pre-1500, there were endless invaders. Egyptians, Persians, Greeks, Romans, British, French, and they left cohorts behind. So over and over again you see that remnants of an invasion. For example, Egypt's conquest of Palestine in 1831 left some 6,000 Egyptians living in Palestine, who are to this day known as the Egyptians. Then came the Ottoman Era, which was 400 years long. And 2 major developments took place between 1517 and 1917. One, in the 1830s, 40s, the Ottomans began putting money into Palestine, investing in it, by building modern infrastructure such as paved roads, railroads, ports, and telegraphs. Secondly, European Jews started to arrive in about 1870. They brought capital and modern skills with them, applied scientific agricultural methods, enhanced sanitation. They opened factories, they built infrastructure, and they engaged in international trade. Many of these activities on both the Ottoman and Jewish sides required labor by non-Jews. There weren't enough Jews to do all the work, both locals and immigrants. The latter came very easily because the Ottoman Empire was a single unit and you could move freely within it. There were no controls. There were no definitions, no controls. People moved back and forth. And so the immigration of Muslims began at that time. It was not entirely spontaneous either, because the Ottoman leadership in Istanbul was wary of these Jewish immigrants and looked at them in the same light as the Armenians and worried that just as they had problems with the Armenians, they had problems with the Jews. So they encouraged, the Ottoman authorities encouraged Muslim immigration to Palestine. Third, pre-1948 era was the British Mandate, which lasted from 1917 to 1948, 30 years. Control by Britain saw the emergence of Palestine, this sort of dagger-shaped unit that the PLO still cherishes. It was a quasi-colony, it was a mandate, kind of odd institution. The British needed inexpensive workers to build their infrastructure, so they preferred Egyptian, Syrian, and other foreign laborers to the Jewish locals. And then the booming Zionist activity attracted yet more Muslim workers who were employed mostly in agriculture, but also in building and services. Ironically, then, many of today's Palestinians trace their origins to their ancestors who came to help build the Zionist project. Officialdom was well aware of this. I already gave you 2 quotes. Here are a couple more. The British government issued the Peel Commission in 1937, and it explained the rising price of real estate as, quote, due less to the amount of land acquired by Jews than to the increase in the Arab population, unquote. The British governor of the Sinai in that same year found it very difficult, quote, to make a case out for the misery of the Arabs if at the same time their compatriots from adjoining states could not be kept from going in to share that misery. And then again, Winston Churchill. Why is there harsh injustice done if Zionists come in and make a livelihood for more and make the desert into palm groves and orange groves? Why is it injustice because there's more work and wealth for everyone? There is no injustice. The immigrants came from all over. The authoritative Encyclopedia Britannica of 1911, the great Encyclopedia Britannica, lists no less than 23 ethnic groups, from the Afghans to the Algerians. I've studied this in some detail and found that it missed another 6 ethnic groups. So there are about 29, 30 ethnic groups that came to Palestine before 1911 from the Muslim world. The encyclopedia also lists no less, quote, no less than 50 languages spoken in Jerusalem as vernaculars. Common Palestinian surnames reflect this geographic origin in North Africa, Egypt, Yemen, Saudi Arabia, Lebanon, Syria, Iraq. Estimates of this Arab immigration vary very widely. For the British authorities ignored it. They were focused on the Jewish immigration. They ignored the Muslim. The British in 1947, an official report estimated just over 1,000 a year. An Israeli researcher found over 3,000 a year. But most interesting was in 1948, Robert F. Kennedy, the future U.S. senator who was murdered by a Palestinian, reported hearing of over 40,000 per year between 1932 and 1944, in order, in his words, quote, to take advantage of living conditions existing in no other Arab state, unquote. This massive immigration explains the very odd United Nations definition of a refugee from Palestine. It had to be someone who lived there for the prior 2 years. 2 years. It didn't have to be 200 years, just 2 years. If you'd been there for 2 years and you left, you were a refugee. Quickly then to look at part 2 since 1948, since the birth of Israel. It's from the time of the birth of Israel in 1948, Muslims had moved in large numbers, neither celebrated nor condemned, individual in nature rather than organized, driven by practical goals rather than by idealism, and smaller than its Jewish counterpart. It is obscure, routine, important, and embarrassing. Obscure because it's not part of a formal movement. Routine because it's not rebuilding an ancient state, but just moving for personal reasons. Important because of its demographic implications. And embarrassing because it contradicts the Palestinian narrative of Muslim hostility towards the Jewish state. The first large group came after the departure, the immigration of Palestinians in 1948. Some 600,000 left. Many wanted to come back, and about 15,000 managed to do so. So within the first couple of years after 1948, 15,000 Palestinians returned. After that, the borders closed. From 1950 to 1967, essentially no one came in. After 1967, after the Israelis won the various territories, the borders were much more open, and all sorts of Muslims decided to vote with their feet and move to Israel. Now, some moved with malign intentions, but the great majority moved in order to take advantage of Israel's superior economy, the higher pay, the greater work opportunities, take advantage of its better services, education, healthcare, health insurance, pension, law enforcement, water, sewage, trash, and also to take advantage of its democracy, the rule of law, freedom of expression. The Palestinians who came in for a whole range of reasons. In part, they were already in eastern Jerusalem and had access, whether citizens or not, to move into Israel. In part, there were husbands and wives. There was a repatriation law that allowed husbands and wives to move in. In part, they were workers. In part, they were gays. In part, they were informants. And then there were the non-Palestinians. Egyptians came in. One 2009 Egyptian estimate found 20,000 Egyptians had moved to Israel. Africans came in great numbers in the early 2000s, about 55,000, of whom 25,000 is still there. Individuals and families came in. There were unending reports across Lebanon and other of Israel's boundaries of families turning up. And then there were a large-scale group, such as 15,000 Druze who made it across from Syria into Israel, and 40,000 Jordanians, according to a 2001 report by the Jordanian government. In conclusion, I think this is a very important fact that gets just no attention, even though 80, 90 years ago was well known. First of all, non-Jewish immigrants make up the majority of the West Bank and Gaza population. One Hamas official, Fatih Hamad, said, exaggerating, half of Palestinians are Egyptian and the other half are Saudis. Not true, but pointing in that direction. So a lot larger population in the West Bank and Gaza. Secondly, the Palestinians are not an Aboriginal, that's a word I cannot say, autochthonous First People, or indigenous people, or native people. Most of them are as recently arrived as the Zionists. Their claims about living in Palestine since antiquity are bogus. There are some spectacular claims. As I said, I'm not going to go into these, but one PLO official claimed that the Palestinians have been there for 10 million years. Third, Muslim Aliyah greatly increased the number of Israel's Muslim citizens, to the point that perhaps 3/4 of them today are either immigrants or the descendants of immigrants. Fourth, there's a startling parallel between the Jewish and Muslim Aliyahs. Two ethnically diverse religious populations simultaneously emigrated to one small territory. Palestinians, like Israelis, represent the ingathering of a far-flung religious community in the Holy Land. And finally, although some Muslim immigrants had malign intentions, to be sure, murder in particular, most sought and seek a better life by making more money, uniting with a fiancé, seeking freedom, or even joining the Zionist enterprise. In all then, Zionism has attracted and benefited Muslims as well as Jews.